In the bone-chilling cold of Connecticut's winter, where the wind howls through every crevice like the whisper of death itself, the Snedeker family stepped into a nightmare they never saw coming. It all began with Philip, their 14-year-old son with sunken eyes and a frail body, ravaged by the merciless grip of Hodgkin's lymphoma. The doctor's verdict was as cold as the air outside. Unless a miracle happened, Philip wouldn't survive another 6 months. Each passing day, he faded further from the energetic boy who once ran across the backyard, becoming a mere shadow trapped in a body decaying from within. To save him, Alan and Carmen, Philip's desperate parents, decided to risk everything. They needed a place close to the hospital, somewhere Philip could access the last experimental treatments. But the cost was immense: hours of driving through icy roads, trips that drained the entire family's strength, especially Philip, who grew weaker with every grueling round of radiation. Out of options, they sold off the remnants of their once peaceful life and scraped together enough to find a new home in Connecticut, closer to hope, yet unknowingly closer to the darkness. Carmen, heart heavy and hands trembling, drove alone through the desolate streets. Streetlights flickered like the watchful eyes of restless spirits. After dozens of failed viewings and hope dwindling to ashes, she spotted an old, towering house shrouded in dense mist. A small, weathered "For Rent" sign swung on rusted chains, creaking in the wind, a haunting invitation. The house stood with peeling walls and dust-streaked windows as though it breathed, waiting. Stepping inside, Carmen was met with a chill that kissed her neck, despite the warm glow of soft yellow lights. The landlord, a man with a thin smile and unreadable eyes, led her down long hallways where every footstep echoed like voices from some distant realm. 4 spacious bedrooms, 2 upstairs, 2 in the basement, enough for their family of 6. The hardwood floors groaned beneath every step, and the old wall patterns seemed to whisper long-forgotten secrets. Carmen was strangely drawn in, not just by the convenience but by its uncanny perfection. Only minutes from the hospital and somehow, miraculously, within their shattered budget. She held her breath, expecting a figure far beyond their means. But instead, the price was just right, like a gift from fate, or a trap laid with eerie precision. The landlord's cold, bony hand closed around hers in a handshake, and the deal was sealed. Unbeknownst to her, in that very moment, she had signed a contract not just with a landlord, but with the shadows. Weeks later, as Alan and Carmen began moving into their new home, they still hadn't told the children about it. Alan, seeing the house for the first time, nodded approvingly at his wife's choice. But the relief was fleeting. While exploring the basement, a damp, dark place heavy with a stench of decay, they found a room Carmen hadn't seen before. The old wooden door groaned open with a scream-like squeak, revealing cold metal tables, strange dusty tools, and a rusted steel basin in the corner. The dim light above cast harsh shadows on saw blades, scalpels, and aged syringes, a silent testament to something grim. They stood frozen. The house where they pinned their last hopes had once been a funeral home, a place where corpses were cut open and prepared for eternal rest. Carmen's stomach twisted. Dread rose in her like a black wave. She wanted to run, to leave immediately. But Alan, voice calm in a way that felt unnatural, stopped her. "We have no choice," he said, despair flashing in his eyes. They had spent everything, signed the lease, and gambled their lives on this place. "Who says anyone even died here?" he added, knowing full well it was a lie. As the winter wind howled outside, they swore to bury this horrifying secret from the children, especially from Philip, the boy already dancing with death. But deep within the basement's shadows, beneath the silence of embalming tools long untouched, something stirred. It was watching. It was listening. And it knew the fresh prey had arrived. The darkness inside the old Connecticut house wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, it breathed, and it was hungry. As the Snedeker family began their new life in what was once a resting place for the dead, they had no idea that every step they took was waking something that had long been watching from the shadows. Philip, the pale, hollow-eyed boy battling cancer, was the first to sense it. He heard it, the cold whispers calling his name from the depths of the basement, where old embalming tools still lay silent, like accomplices to an untold crime. It started small, but enough to freeze the blood in your veins. One icy winter afternoon, Carmen poured hot, soapy water into a bucket to mop the floors. Steam rose like spirits escaping from graves. But as she knelt down, scrubbing the creaky wooden floor, the water suddenly thickened, turning deep red like clotted blood. It crept across the wood, clinging to her hands, warm, metallic, and pungent, as if it had just spilled from a living body. Carmen screamed and stumbled back. But in a blink it was gone. The water was clear, the floor spotless. Shaking, she told herself it was just exhaustion, sleepless nights and worry over Philip. But deep down she knew that was no hallucination. Philip, meanwhile, was being pulled deeper into the basement's grip. One day, as he dragged himself down the rotting stairs, a blast of icy air wrapped around his legs like a corpse's hand. He heard it again. "Philip, Philip," calling from the embalming room where light refused to shine. His eyes locked onto the shadows, and then he saw it, a tall, hazy figure standing motionless in the corner. Its eyes glowed red, like embers burning from the depths of hell. He bolted upstairs, heart pounding, yelling at his mother that they had to leave, that something in the house wanted them dead. But Carmen, lips pressed tight, eyes dulled from stress, dismissed his fear. "You're sick, Philip," she said. "It's just your mind." She didn't believe him. No one did. But the darkness didn't stop with Philip. His little sister, a cheerful girl with golden hair who often played with dolls, began to see things she shouldn't. One night, as the wind screamed past the windows like the cries of trapped souls, she looked up from her dollhouse and froze. A woman, no, something like a woman, stood in the corner. Skin waxy and pale, eyes sunken like endless black holes. It stared at the girl, and then it roared, a sound that didn't belong in this world. She screamed and ran into Carmen's arms. But when Carmen stormed in to check, there was nothing. Only darkness. She blamed the boys, thinking it was a cruel prank. But they swore, trembling, they had nothing to do with it. For the first time, Carmen felt a chill deep in her spine, not from the winter outside, but from something far more sinister. At night, the basement turned into a realm of terror. The two boys who slept down there were constantly awakened by heavy footsteps, pounding knocks, and the glimpse of a tall man passing by the door. They saw it, those glowing red eyes, that twisted face contorted by agony and hate. "Philip," it whispered, its voice like a blade slicing the air. They clung to each other, begging their mother to believe them. But Carmen only shook her head. "You're imagining things," she insisted. Yet even she had begun to doubt. How could two people see the same thing at the same time, if it was just imagination? Then one night it went too far. Carmen was setting the table for dinner, hands trembling with fatigue. She turned to grab meat from the fridge, but when she came back, all the plates were gone. Vanished, no trace, as if they'd never been there. She stood there, dizzy, feeling the floor shift beneath her. At the same time, Philip's younger brother, Bobby, heard the whispering again, coming from the basement. He peeked through the crack in the door, and saw it. The man. Tall, blurred, muttering Philip's name in a guttural, inhuman voice. Bobby sprinted upstairs, colliding with Carmen. Together they rushed to the basement to confront whatever it was. But when the door creaked open, there was only silence. A thick, heavy silence, like a monster holding its breath, grinning in the dark. Philip changed. He was no longer the helpless boy begging for help. After one night spent face to face with the thing in the basement, he grew cold, distant. His eyes now burned with an unexplained rage. He demanded to be left alone, banished Bobby from the basement, and severed the once tight bond between them. But stranger still, his cancer began to retreat. A miracle, they thought. An answer to their prayers. But Philip wasn't celebrating. He sat in the shadows, muttering to himself, as if speaking to something no one else could see. Carmen began to believe the house wasn't just haunted, it was consuming her son, piece by piece. But she didn't yet know. In the basement's darkness, the red eyes of the man still watched, still waited, for the moment he could drag them all into the abyss. The darkness in the Connecticut house was no longer a silent stalker. It had revealed its true form, a demonic fury determined to devour the Snedeker family whole. Philip, once the fragile beacon of hope, had now been overtaken by that darkness. After a night of confronting the entity in the basement, a man with blood-red eyes and a growling, hate-filled voice, he became a stranger. He attacked Teresa, the cousin who had just moved in, punching her in the face with a twisted smile that didn't belong to any human. Her screams echoed through the house, bringing Alan and Carmen running. They found Philip with empty eyes, muttering curses in an unintelligible tongue, before he was taken away by police and medics, thrashing and howling. As he was dragged out, he looked back with a chilling gaze and whispered a final warning, "Now that I'm gone, it's coming for you. And it will be much, much worse." Philip's prophecy quickly came true. The house trembled as if clutched by an invisible, wrathful hand. One freezing night, Carmen felt the shower curtain wrapped tightly around her neck, squeezing like a giant serpent. She thrashed, her nails clawing desperately until Teresa burst in and ripped the curtain away, both of them collapsing onto the wet floor, shaking. At the same time, Teresa's rosary tightened violently around her neck, as if trying to crush her bones. Miles away, Alan, working the night shift, heard his truck's engine roar to life even though the keys were in his pocket. He ran outside just in time to see the truck speeding toward him, aimed directly at his chest, guided, it seemed, by a malevolent will. Back at home, Carmen received a phone call. No voice, just raspy laughter echoing from the depths of the earth, heating the phone in her hand until it melted. The house had become a war zone. A black cloud loomed near the ceiling, hissing with sounds not meant for human ears. Furniture flew across rooms, chairs tumbled, and unseen forces hurled objects in fits of rage. Carmen and Teresa, huddled with the children, finally accepted Philip had been right. This thing didn't just want to scare them, it wanted their lives. In desperation, Carmen called the priest who had married her and Alan. He arrived during a snowstorm, solemn and composed, but his advice shattered her. Ignore it and it will go away. How do you ignore something that's tried to kill you? Something growling in the shadows, waiting for its next chance? With the church unwilling to help, Carmen turned to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigators, their eyes sharp with purpose and the promise of salvation. Lorraine stepped into the house and was immediately dragged down to the basement by an unseen force. There, in the embalming room, she felt something beyond wandering spirits. She felt a gateway to hell itself, filled with the screams of the damned. "This isn't just a haunted house," she whispered, trembling. "It's a furnace of evil." The Warrens called in John Zaffis, another seasoned investigator who brought cameras and sensors to capture proof. The family and investigators all slept together in the living room by the fireplace, seeking safety in numbers, but even their presence didn't stop the entity. Their mattresses pulsed like living chests and death's cold breath lingered in the air. One night, John sat alone in the kitchen. The temperature dropped suddenly, his breath turning to mist. The basement door creaked open with a screech and he saw it. The man in the suit, face contorted, red eyes glowing with unholy fire. John screamed and sprinted back to the others, waking everyone and fleeing the house in pure terror. He later swore it was the most malevolent entity he had ever faced in decades of paranormal work. At last, after weeks of relentless terror, the church agreed to send Father Richard to perform an exorcism. He arrived during a raging snowstorm, clutching a crucifix, his gaze unyielding. As he sprinkled holy water on the basement floor, the air grew heavier, like the house itself was screaming in pain. The exorcism lasted hours. Objects flew, the demon roared through the walls, and Teresa was lifted into the air by an invisible force, choked midair. But Father Richard didn't flinch. With his final prayer, everything stopped, silent, still as if hell had been sealed shut once more. The Snedekers sold the house soon after and fled their nightmare. Philip returned from the psychiatric hospital healthier than ever, his cancer mysteriously gone, but he never spoke of what the entity had whispered to him in the dark. The house still stands, quiet amid the snowy fields, but those who once lived within its walls still wonder, has the gateway to hell truly closed, or is it merely waiting for the next soul to open it? And are the red eyes of the man in the suit still lurking, hungry for new spirits to consume?